RTV6, Indianapolis This Week.
And thank you for joining us on this Sunday. We start with the threat of terrorism right here in central Indiana. You watched it all unfold right here on RTV6. A Brownsburg man arrested as he tried to board a bus to New York to catch a flight overseas to join ISIS. Investigators also revealing to us that Akram Musleh had been under 24-hour surveillance for more than a year. They say he researched potential terror targets here in Indiana and even went to a Walmart looking to buy pressure cookers similar to the bombs used in the Boston Marathon bombing.
Hoosiers should be comforted that in this instance the FBI and law enforcement at every level in the state of Indiana worked in a collaborative way in the best tradition of law enforcement to identify this individual, to isolate this individual, and to arrest this individual before they could do harm to others.
Joining us now is Peter Bering, internationally recognized expert on terrorism as well as security and emergency preparedness. On the issue of Akram Musleh, this is not San Bernardino, this is not New York City or Boston. Many people are still saying suburban Indianapolis, a kid from Brownsburg?
Well, to be fair, we are one of the largest cities in North America, and we are a hub for all kinds of activities. It's easy to get here. All of the things that make this an attractive place for business, industry, and transportation also make it possible, if not in some respects likely, that we would have people that would be interested in causes like ISIL and similarly radical organizations. I don't think that people should be completely surprised that the internet's tentacles reach to central Indiana. We know that the technologies that we all take for granted and that make us more effective and more efficient are also being used by the forces of ill will, and that they're using those to recruit, raise money, and do other things to further their interests.
This gave us an insight as well as to the efforts that the FBI is really employing in an effort to find people who may be contacting ISIS. We were able to see, at least through the documents filed in federal court, just the amount of surveillance, the amount of effort that went into pinpointing this alleged incident.
Well, make no mistake, this is a very complex investigation, and hats off to the agents from the FBI who have clearly worked very, very hard on a complex collection of investigations, because it's not just monitoring this young man's activities, but it is looking at his online profile, running to ground all of the various activities that he's been involved with, the people that he has been communicating with. It has involved looking at his planned travel, examining those sorts of things. And to their credit, the FBI has worked very hard and with support of local and state officials to figure out how to do these cases.
The FBI does not comment on ongoing or pending investigations, so is it safe to assume that there may be other cases that we're just not aware of in Indiana? Again, we often think that these things happen off on the coast, right? They happen somewhere else. You don't want to think that we have a case like this in our backyard. We are part of the global economy. We are part of the world. But I think at the end of the day, as Hoosiers, we hope that those things happen over there somewhere. Do you believe that there are other cases possibly that the FBI in Indiana is looking at?
Well, I think it's statistically likely, given the diverse and extensive nature of our population, given our geographic connections, and given the realities that we're no longer protected by big oceans and friendly neighbors north and south. You know, terrorism used to be something that happened in faraway places, and thankfully, through a lot of hard work from a lot of people over the course of the past couple of decades, we haven't seen another September 11th kind of attack. But unfortunately, we have seen some more of these lower level, lower impact kinds of events. And we also know that the bad guys have kind of franchised their ideology so that rather than advocating spectacular acts of super terrorism, they have pushed it down to say, if you are able and willing to carry out a smaller scale attack, then you should. All of those things are troubling because we know that bad guys are agile and they only have to get it right, whereas the good guys have to get it right every single time. And that's a tall, tall order.
Peter Berry, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please come back anytime.
Mayors from all across the country and here in Indiana are all in town this weekend for the U.S. Conference of Mayors, including a rising Hoosier political star, the Democratic mayor of South Bend, Pete Buttigieg. The New York Times profiled him this month with a headline asking whether he might one day become the first gay president, touting in part his military service, academic credentials, and age, still just 34 years old. And we want to welcome in the mayor of South Bend, Pete Buttigieg. Great to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
How are things in South Bend, Mr.
Fantastic. City's on a roll right now. You know, we're a community that's been through a lot, really over the last 50 years. I mean, ever since, you know, we were a company town that lost our company when Studebaker stopped making cars. So to see what's going on right now, the economic revitalization, neighborhoods coming back, a whole new relationship with the University of Notre Dame and the other colleges there, it's just an exciting time to have this job.
Let's talk about that economic revitalization a little bit more. It's a big issue, of course, in the ongoing governor's race here. Governor Mike Pence saying the economy is strong. Democratic candidate John Gregg saying it's strong, but it should be stronger. Where do you sit on that?
I guess the way I'd answer that is there's a lot of strength in the economy, but it's not getting to everybody. So we're thrilled as a mayor. I'm thrilled with what we're seeing in terms of jobs added, employment in our community, investment in our community. But I think we also got to prepare for the long run. We can't sustain economic growth if we're shorting infrastructure, if we're shorting education. You know, workforce is a huge issue, and I don't think we're investing enough. And it's also a recovery that not everybody is feeling. I think the reason you're seeing a lot of angst in the electorate right now is that a lot of people are saying that recovery looks great on paper, but my wages aren't going anywhere. And that's why we got to concentrate on wages, income, and making sure that that growing prosperity actually reaches most Hoosiers and most Americans.
Let's talk about the gun control issue now. State Representative Ed Delaney, an impassioned speech out on the Capitol lawn this week talking about that. Your view, is the state doing enough right now to keep its citizens safe?
You know, I think we could do more. Look, we all, or at least most of us, believe in the Second Amendment, support the Second Amendment, and also believe in some common sense measures. So when you look at what we're doing by way of background checks and ask if that's enough, the simple fact is I'm an evidence guy. I go based on what actually works in practical terms. And we know there are some places that seem to have less of a problem with gun violence than others. And if there are laws that are part of that, we got to find out what they're doing and make sure that we're doing the right thing too. Consistent with the Second Amendment, consistent with what we all believe, but making sure we've met our fundamental obligation, whether you're a mayor or the president, which is to keep people safe.
Finally, on a personal level, you were elected with 74% your first time around, 80% your second time around last year. For politicians that struggle with their approval levels out there, what do you attribute your popularity to?
Well, obviously, a lot of it has to do with South Bend's success, a lot of things going well, whether it's the neighborhoods and tackling vacant and abandoned housing or areas like the downtown where we're seeing so much growth and investment. You know, the most important thing, I think, for anyone in elected office is to do a lot of listening, to listen to your community, see where they are. You can't please everybody all of the time, but even if people disagree with you on an individual decision, if you've listened to them, if you explain why you think you're doing the right thing, and you're willing to adjust as you go along, then I think people give you a lot of credit.
On this Sunday, which session are you looking forward to more? Lady Gaga and the Dalai Lama or Hillary Clinton on Sunday afternoon?
Ooh, that's tough competition. I think the proof will be in the pudding. We'll see which one's more entertaining.
See what happens. Mr. Mayor, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Great to see you. We turn our attention now to the very intense debate over gun control. We start here in Indiana where, as we mentioned, Democrat Ed Delaney is calling for overhauls to the state's gun rules. He's citing the arrest of a southern Indiana man near the LA Gay Pride Parade. Police there caught James Howell with a car packed with weapons and explosive materials, weapons he never should have had. A judge had ordered him to surrender his firearms after a conviction in April for intimidation. And we want to welcome in Democratic State Representative Ed Delaney. Representative Delaney, thanks so much for coming in.
Good to see you.
You were very impassioned this week with your address on the Capitol lawn. Why now?
I think, like a lot of Americans, I feel that we've had simply too many incidents of massive gun violence, too many deaths in too many different circumstances, and it's time to see if we can't do better. And I'm going to speak out on that because I think we can do better. It's that simple.
You briefly addressed the specific things that you would like to see done, but you also acknowledge it's not that easy moving forward on this at the state level. Why is that right now?
No, there's great resistance in the legislature, and I think the core reason is that a lot of members of the legislature, especially the Republican members, feel that if they try to promote gun safety, they'll have a problem in their primary and lose. And I think they're overreacting. I think the public is ready to do something about gun safety. I think the public is tired of all this killing. But that's their reaction, and it's true of some of my members too. So that's the core problem. And the lobby, who is against any kind of attempt to be safe and restrict use of automatic weapons, or not automatic, we're really not talking about those, we're talking about assault weapons, military-type weapons. The people who are resistant to that are very organized, very focused, very committed, one-issue voters, and we have to decide whether they control or not.
How frustrated are you right now with Washington?
Well, I gave up on Washington in general a few years ago, but on this one, they're wasting our time. The reforms, the quote reforms that they're rejecting are very narrow and very limited to deal with a small number of terrorist suspects. So I'm completely frustrated, and that's the problem. We either address it state by state, sadly, or it doesn't get addressed. So here I am in this one state. I want to address it.
Since you made those comments, you said that there have been no shortage of probably phone calls and emails that have come into your office. What have those been like?
Well, we got a lot of negative reactions. A lot of people saying they're not going to vote for me, and I understand that. That's politics. If people don't want to vote for me, that's their business. Many of the people who say they're not going to vote for me happily don't live in my district. And I've got a lot of positive reinforcement, mainly on the narrow point of, can't we talk about it? That's what people are patting me on the back about. You've started the conversation. They're not burrowing into the details of exactly what we need to do or how we could address it, but they're just glad that we're talking about it, and that's what I'm trying to do.
You also made remarks about James Howell, the Indiana man arrested in California with a car full of weapons, and you said that simply the laws are not being followed, they're not being adhered to. How do we as a state address that? How do we as a nation address that?
Well, I think we need to do really three things to enforce the current limited laws that say that if you've been arrested, for example, on a gun charge, you have to turn in your guns. Okay, that's the law right now. Okay, first we have to just enforce it. But part of it is that attitude. Our judges, our probation officers, our police department have to be a little more sensitive and say, wait a minute, there's a very high risk this person will use, a heavy weapon on people, an assault weapon. Okay. So we better be careful. We got to work harder on this person on probation violation than on somebody who's got a simpler threat, poses less of a threat. So that's attitude. Then we got to make sure our resources work. We're putting a big load on our probation officers. We need to give them money and equipment so they can look on the Facebook page and see what you've said. All right? So they can look and see whether you've been arrested in Kentucky. So they can report quickly and promptly to the state so that our central filing agency with the state police knows what you've done. So, and then last, we need legislation that makes those steps better and also deals with the weapons that should not be allowed.
State Representative Ed Delaney,
appreciate
it. Good to see you. And of course, the story about gun control this week, the sit-in by House Democrats more than 25 hours long, demanding a vote on new restrictions, including banning those on the no-fly list from buying a weapon. House Speaker Paul Ryan called it a political stunt, saying Democrats were using the effort to fundraise. Our team talked with Indiana Democrat Andre Carson just minutes after the sit-in ended as he walked the steps outside the Capitol.
We have our friends here with the Disarm Hate campaign, the Disarm Hate campaign. They're here in full force. They're taking stand. And I think right now what you see, you're seeing a dialogue, you've seen politicians talk to average everyday people, live streaming and tweeting out what was going on, keeping people abreast, and it sparked a movement and a deeper conversation that transcends political affiliation, racial identity, religious identity, and social identity. Was it a political stunt when the Republican Party shut down the American government for many days, causing loss of jobs, causing deep anxiety, causing our economy to become unstable? Was it a publicity stunt when the Republicans repeatedly shut down the government after the American people said, do not shut down the government? They insisted on shutting down the government. And so why is it legitimate when they make a political statement, but it becomes illegitimate when Democrats reflect the will of the people?
Our thanks to the congressman for checking in. Our thanks to our political insiders as well for being here. Former state Democratic Party Chairman Kip 2, Republican strategist Marcus Barlow. Gentlemen, hello. Good to see you.
Good to be here.
We're talking about gun control and politics, and immediately kind of everyone bristles up because it's a caustic debate right now. Give me your assessment over what's happened over the past couple of weeks and really what could potentially happen over the next week or two. Kip?
I don't see too much changing. I think the only thing that's going to change is if the November election, the people that want to see some rationality return to the gun debate actually come out to the polls and vote single issue. That's the way things have always changed in this country. That's the only way things are going to change in this debate. The NRA has a stranglehold on the United States Congress. They have a stranglehold on the Indiana General Assembly, and I don't see it changing unless people come out and vote.
Marcus?
Well, I don't think, stranglehold, I think, is a little bit strong of a term. The NRA lobbies as any other special interest group does. They don't spend near as much as the teachers union or the AARP, so they are one of interest that go. And I think what we've seen.
But when it comes to the gun issue, they are the main swinger.
They are, and I think
they're the most effective lobbying organization in this country.
No, I think our United States Constitution effectively lobbies for gun rights. And, for me personally, and I think what we've seen in a lot of this conversation is, where does that line end? Like,
maybe it ought to end where terrorists can't get the guns. I mean, that's the reasonable argument I think that we're trying to have today, and we can't get Congress to even act on that.
But I think a reasonable argument also is Democrats want a list to determine who can and cannot have their constitutional rights. That list is made by an appointed government official arbitrarily.
We have
and so when saying that all we want is due process is not an unreasonable point.
It isn't,
and so we should
have a no-fly list.
We should have that. You don't have a constitutional right to fly. It's in our Constitution. If Democrats want to change that, you can change our Constitution. We have a method of doing that, but they don't. They want to legislatively chip away at our constitutional rights.
You can't take a gun on the plane, can you? You can't. You don't have a constitutional right to a hand grenade.
We also have gun-free zones as well.
There are limits.
Now we're talking about an individual's right to own what is not an assault rifle in an AR-15, and that's also been mixed up.
There are limits in place, and the debate over where those limits go from here is definitely on the table right now. Let's talk about what State Representative Ed Delaney said. He said he's lost faith in Washington. He thinks something should be done here on the state level. What's got a better chance of going through right now? Kip?
Well, I mean, not to bring me up, but I tried something at the city-county level and couldn't get it done. So I don't know in a Democratic city. And so I don't have a lot of hope at the moment that anything's going to change. After Sandy Hook happened and Congress couldn't act is when I began to really lose hope in the ability for the American people to take this issue seriously. It is a carnage. It is a travesty. And I can't believe we as Americans aren't doing anything about it. The short answer to your question is I don't know where it's going to happen unless people come out and vote and change.
I don't think any American would deny that these mass shootings are a tragedy. But I think what a lot of people right now and what's coming out of Washington and why people might not feel trust in Washington, different than what I think Ed Delaney's talking about, is what are we talking about here? I mean, the Orlando massacre, a guy that pledged loyalty to ISIS, a guy that on his social media talked about his loyalty to ISIS. After it happened, ISIS takes credit for it. And what's the response from the administration? We need more gun control. They refused to actually identify the threat and talk about it. So I think a lot of people are sitting around and thinking,
see, this is why it's so absurd. This is why it's so absurd.
It's not absurd. He said it.
Absurd.
It was in black and white.
That we have a president who is attacking ISIS every day where ISIS lives. And then these people say, well, you're not doing anything about ISIS because you're not recognizing that the reason this guy did this was because he's a member of ISIS. Well, the reason he did it because he had easy access to a gun he shouldn't have easy access to. And that is why he did. That's why he got away with what he got away with. And
don't you think in order to address a threat, a president has to be honest about that threat with the American people?
He's completely honest about the threat. He is taking ISIS on where they exist in large numbers. Well,
we saw them exist in Orlando. We saw them exist in Orlando and attack.
He is a lone wolf, and there's going to be lone wolves that'll get away with stuff. We had a domestic terrorist who blew up a bomb.
More and more is coming out about the people that helped him out, about the resources that he had. He had been investigated by the FBI.
Right. I know that.
More and more is coming out about it. So I think that people reasonably are questioning where should our focus be right now.
The number of these mass shooters, though, still, those that have pledged allegiance to an Islamic group is still such a small fraction compared to the rest. But the big debate is also how much does that change going forward?
We had a guy in South Carolina who is a right-winger who professed Christianity went in and blew a bunch of black people away. You know, it is not because this guy was a member of that ISIS and this guy is a member of a neo-Nazi party that's the problem with the carnage in our country. The problem in our country is too many guns.
Kip gets the last word simply on time. Marcus, Kip, thank you so much for joining us, and join us right now on social media, Facebook and Twitter, right there at Indy This Week.